Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Perpetual here. If you're new, you're warmly welcome, and thank you all so much for joining me today as I make a delicious okra stew. Come along and let's get started. As always, all the ingredients with the exact measurements will be in the description box below. I'm starting by blending some onions, habanero peppers, garlic, and ginger, and I'm going to be using that to steam my goat meat. So once my washed goat meat goes into my pot, I'm going to go ahead and pour my blended mix over it, and I'm going to add some salt, cover it up, and allow it to steam for about 20 minutes or until the goat meat starts to soften. Next up, I'm gonna start working on my okra. I'm using fresh ones here, and what I do, because they're quite large, I'm going to be slicing it into 4 pieces, and you can chop them into any size that you desire. I cut them not too small because I do like a bit of texture in my okra stew. Now, traditionally, when it comes to okra, when you're boiling it, a lot of people do add a kiln to the water. I'm not using any today, and I find that I'm still able to maintain that slime and that draw that you want from the sliminess of the okra. And I ensure that the slime is maintained by not adding any tomatoes or adding very little to it. So it's just a personal preference. And as you can see here, you can also cut it into the rounds without cutting it into several pieces, so you get larger and rounder pieces. I'm combining the two today, but you can use either of the two. It is just a personal preference. I had some leftover hot water from making my bangkun, so I'm going to start with that just to allow the okra to cook a little bit faster. So I'm transferring my okra into my pot, and that's gonna boil for a few minutes until the okra is soft to touch. And after that, I'm going to roughly chop my greens, which is gboma in this case, and that's gonna go in later. I forgot to film chopping up my garden eggs, so I'm adding a little bit of chopped garden eggs to my okra. If you have eggplant, you can use a bit of that as well, and it is optional, but I do like it in my okra stew. And while the okra cooks, I'm going to check on my goat meat, and it is looking absolutely amazing and it smells divine. And at this point, if the wele that you're using is too hard, you can add it to your goat meat to allow it to pre-cook a little bit before it goes into your stew when you're making the stew. Alright, now it's time to start on my other proteins. What I'm chopping here is momone, which is fermented fish, and I have some smoked tuna. I'm going to use chunks of that, as well as some smoked mackerel, toolo beef. I have wele chopped up as well. So all of that is gonna go into my okra stew. I love having different types of protein. I just like that you have so much variety in there. So I just run my hands by the side. I did it for the tuna and I'm doing it for the smoked mackerel as well. Just trying to get out any little bones so that they don't end up in my stew. And of course, I need to have my crab. So I'm just cleaning up a bit of crab, a few pieces, and that's gonna be going into my stew as well. And guys, before we continue, if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, please be sure to hit the subscribe button as well as your notification bell so that you know when I upload more amazing videos. And I just added my gboma or my greens, and as soon as I add it, I'm going to take it off the heat because it will continue cooking in the stew as well. And for your greens, spinach or kontomire is a perfect alternative. Alright, so now the prep is almost done. I'm just going to finely chop some onions that will be going into my stew. And when I'm done slicing, I'm going to roughly chop one more onion that I will be blending as well. So I'm going to be blending my onions with a little bit of garlic and ginger. And I'm just roughly chopping that just to allow it to blend faster. So the onions, ginger, and garlic are gonna go into the blender along with some habanero peppers. And once those go in, I'm adding a little bit of water and I'm going to blend it until it is nice and smooth. Alright, now that all that prep is done, finally starting the stew with some hot palm oil, and I'm going in with my sliced onions. I'm going to let that cook for a few minutes, and once that's done, I will add in my fermented fish or momone and allow that to infuse into my palm oil as well, and then we'll keep going. Alright, next up, I'm going in with my onion, ginger, pepper mix in here. And this is also going to cook for a few minutes. And I like to leave this part on low heat just to allow it to take its time and cook really well. You can cover it up at this point if you want to speed up the cooking process a little bit. And once the onion mix starts to cook in the stew for a few minutes, I'm going to give it a quick stir, and then I will be adding my goat meat. I'm putting it in early just to allow it to soften up a lot more so it has more time to cook, and also to make sure that I get a lot of flavor into my stew. So after putting the goat meat, I'm also adding a little bit of my stock from when I steamed my goat meat. And while I'm at it, I'm also adding my toolo beef and my Wele to my stew, again to allow it all to cook and become nice and soft for me. And as I mentioned earlier, I did not use any tomatoes in this stew just to be able to maintain the slime from the okra, because I did not use any eggplant in my okra when I was boiling it. And again, it is just a personal preference. If you don't mind using it, feel free to add it, and then you can add a little bit of tomatoes to your stew as well. And my crab has now gone in after a few minutes of the other proteins cooking, and I'm just going to cover it up and allow the stew to continue cooking. And my last protein to go in is my smoked tuna and my smoked mackerel. I'm going to give that a quick stir and let the stew continue cooking. Now look at how amazing our stew is looking. It smells so good, and I cannot wait for it to be all done. And our stew is well underway. I'm just adding some Maggi shrimp cube. If you're not a fan of seasoning tablets, you can use a bit of shrimp powder. And I'm also adjusting my salt. I'm adding a little bit more. I usually salt my stew towards the end, as I have salt from the goat meat, I have salt from the toolo beef, from the momone, so I definitely don't want to salt it too early, as that can make it overly salty. And now the most important ingredient in my okra stew can go in. My okra, garden egg, and gboma mix is now going in, and I'm going to give it a stir. And since it's already cooked, once it goes into the stew, it just needs a few more minutes on really low heat just to infuse all the flavors together. But that is it. You have to admit that this looks amazing, and I'm sure you're bringing your plate over right now. Today we're serving it with some bangkun, and I cannot wait to dig in. It looks so good and it smells even better. And guys, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a thumbs up and let me know in the comment section when you try this amazing recipe out. And thank you so much for coming along with me on this absolutely delicious journey. Take care, guys. I'll see you again very soon.